They noticed her the moment she walked in, not because she was loud or flashy or seeking attention. Quite the opposite. She was quiet, composed, a new face against a sea of familiarity. But it wasn't just her silence that made her stand out. It was the way she carried it. Imani Carter stepped through the glass doors of Crestwood High like someone who'd learned long ago that survival wasn't about being seen. It was about seeing everything. Her posture was perfect, but not rigid. Her gaze met no one's directly, yet missed nothing. In a school of 900 students, she was one of only 7 who were black, and the only one new. For most people, transferring mid-semester was a nightmare. For Imani, it was simply another recalibration, another set of faces to map, another terrain to read. Crestwood was clean, polished, and predictably white. Students buzzed through the halls with practiced ease, clustered by social allegiance. Athletes, drama kids, academic overachievers. Imani had seen it before. Every school claimed to be different, but beneath the surface, they all followed the same script. By lunchtime, she had already memorized the major players. The student body moved like a well-rehearsed play until Brandon Keller broke the rhythm. Brandon was 6'1" with slick, blonde hair and a confidence too big for his shoulders. His friends, Logan Pike and Tyler Dean, trailed behind him like loyal shadows. The way they walked, the way they looked at others, it wasn't confidence, it was ownership. When Imani passed their table, Brandon leaned back in his seat and called out just loud enough to carry across the cafeteria. "Well, look who wandered in. Don't think we've met yet." She didn't break stride, didn't respond, just kept walking, tray in hand, scanning for an empty table. Brandon smirked. "Hey, I'm talking to you." She stopped, turned, calmly met his eyes. "I heard you," she said. Her voice was soft but unyielding. A murmur rippled through nearby tables. Few dared to meet Brandon's stare, let alone match it. Imani didn't blink. Brandon rose from his chair with deliberate slowness, adjusting his varsity jacket. "We have a little tradition for new students," and he said. "Call it a welcome policy. Helps keep the peace." Tyler stepped forward. "Just a small contribution, you know. Insurance. Make sure your locker doesn't get jammed, your books don't go missing, that kind of thing." "Funny," Imani said. "I've been to 3 schools. This is the first where extortion comes with a dress code." A few gasps, 1 or 2 stifled laughs. Brandon's smirk faltered, just for a second, then returned sharper. "You think you're clever, but clever doesn't go far here." "I'm not here to go far," she replied. "Just here to eat my lunch in peace." She walked away without another word. She sat alone, unbothered. But every move she made, unhurried, intentional, told them exactly what they needed to know. She wasn't afraid. That was the problem. Fear is what gave boys like Brandon their power. Fear of standing out, fear of being targeted, fear of the consequences that came from saying no. But Imani had learned long ago, when the people mistake your silence for weakness, it becomes your greatest weapon. At home that night, she didn't mention the encounter. Her mother, Dr. Rachel Carter, came home after a 12-hour shift at the hospital, exhausted but smiling. Imani kissed her cheek, warmed up leftovers, and pretended everything was normal. She wasn't lying, just waiting. In the basement, beneath exposed pipes and concrete walls, hung a single heavy bag. Imani taped her hands, loosened her shoulders, and moved. Each strike landed with fluid precision. Jab, cross, hook, pivot, block. Not violence, not anger, discipline, control. The body remembers what the mind didn't have to say. Back upstairs, the school lay quiet. But in the cafeteria the next day, whispers followed her, not from admiration, from curiosity, from threat. Brandon wasn't used to being ignored, and boys like him didn't forget. The fuse had been lit, and no one, least of all Brandon, understood how dangerous a quiet spark could be. The second day began with silence, the kind that stretches just a little too long in the hallway when someone walks past. Imani felt it before she heard it. Eyes lingered, voices dropped. Students leaned into lockers, watching without watching. She wasn't surprised. The moment she said no to Brandon Keller, the entire school had been handed a script. She had gone off book. And in places like Crestwood, going off book came with consequences. By mid-morning, the retaliation began. Her locker jammed on the first attempt. She checked the combination, tried again, still stuck. A senior in a polo shirt leaned in from a few feet away. Maybe the lockers here don't like new people. Imani didn't answer. She pulled a bobby pin from her pocket, a habit from moving schools too often, and dislodged a wad of chewed gum blocking the mechanism. She opened the locker, slowly, cleanly, then shut it again. The second period passed uneventfully. So did the third. But at lunch, the air shifted again. She had barely sat down with her sandwich when a tray landed beside her, toppling a cup of juice onto her books. "Oops," said Tyler Dean, his smile too big for his face. "Sorry, must have slipped." Students turned to look. No one moved to help. Imani wiped her journal quietly with a napkin and didn't flinch. Tyler stood over her, waiting for a reaction. When he didn't get one, he leaned in. "Just letting you know, Brandon doesn't forget." She looked up, not with fear, not even with anger, just the kind of cold, steady gaze that made boys like Tyler shift uncomfortably. She said nothing, and Tyler walked away, unsettled. Across the cafeteria, Noah Lewis watched from his table, frowning. A quiet sophomore with wireframe glasses and a well-worn hoodie, Noah had seen this pattern before. He had been a target once. Until he learned how to blend in so well, he almost disappeared. But watching Imani refuse to disappear, that was something new. After lunch, in the hallway between periods, someone accidentally bumped her hard enough to knock her books out of her hands. As she bent to gather them, she noticed one was missing. She found it minutes later in the hands of Logan Pike, standing near a group of freshmen, reading passages aloud in a mocking tone. "Courage doesn't always roar," he read in a dramatic voice. "Sometimes it's the quiet voice at the end of the day saying, 'What? Try again tomorrow?'" He snorted. "What is this, fortune cookies for loners?" Imani approached without hurry. "That's my notebook." "Is it? You sure? Because it kind of sounds like poetry for kids who sit alone." She didn't argue. Instead, she took out her phone and snapped a photo of him holding it. Logan blinked. "What the hell are you doing?" "Building a case," she said, pocketing the phone. "Give it back." He hesitated, then shoved the notebook into her hands with a muttered curse. As she walked away, she passed Noah again, this time leaning against a locker. He didn't say anything until she was a few steps past him. "Brandon doesn't just bully," he said quietly. "He builds traps. He wants you to react so he can make you look like the problem." Imani turned her head slightly. "Thanks for the warning." "I'm not warning you," Noah said. "I'm telling you what happened to the last kid who stood up to him." She didn't respond, not out of defiance, but because she already knew sometimes silence was sharper than speech. What none of them knew, not Brandon, not Tyler, not even Noah, was that Imani wasn't trying to win a war. She was drawing a line, and lines drawn with discipline don't shake easily. By Thursday, the school hallways had become a silent jury. Every glance toward Imani Carter carried a verdict, some of curiosity, others of caution, and a few of contempt. The morning began like the others. Eyes followed her, but no one spoke. That was the thing about power at Crestwood. It didn't need to yell. It watched. It waited. It lets discomfort do the work. Imani walked through it like she always had, steady, deliberate, unshaken. But even the strong have limits. In fifth period English, the final thread snapped. Mrs. Hawthorne, a well-meaning teacher with more idealism than authority, had just finished her lecture on To Kill a Mockingbird when Brandon Keller raised his hand. "I think," he said, voice honeyed with mock sincerity, "we should hear from Imani. I bet she has some relevant insight into racial injustice." The room went still. Imani turned her head slowly, meeting Brandon's smile, the one that never touched his eyes. Mrs. Hawthorne, unaware of the setup, smiled warmly. "That's a great idea. Imani, would you like to share your thoughts?" Imani's fingers curled slightly around her pencil. She could have declined, could have excused herself. But she didn't. Instead, she spoke, clear, calm, and devastatingly composed. She spoke not only about the book, but about what it meant to exist in spaces where your very presence was considered disruptive. She spoke about quiet resistance, about the burden of having to remain composed while being provoked, about the difference between justice in theory and justice in practice. When she finished, the room was dead silent. And then Brandon began to clap, slow, sarcastic, slicing. "Wow," he said, "so articulate, really. For someone from your background, that's impressive." Mrs. Hawthorne paled. A few students shifted uncomfortably. One dropped their pen. Imani's reply was soft but sharp. "I appreciate you recognizing my ability to speak. You should try it sometime with something worth saying." A flicker of something, shock, embarrassment, passed over Brandon's face, but he recovered quickly. "Just saying sometimes it's nice when people like you surprise us." Imani didn't flinch. "People like me? You mean quiet, educated, or not white?" Gasps this time, audible. Mrs. Hawthorne opened her mouth, then closed it again. The bell rang. Imani gathered her things without haste and walked out, her spine straight, her pace unhurried. But inside she felt it. Something had shifted. In her, around her, against her. Brandon had crossed a line. And the worst part? He knew it. He wanted her to react, because a reaction was something he could twist, frame, and control. That night, she didn't go to the basement to train. She sat in the kitchen instead, her journal open, her pen unmoving. Across from her, Dr. Rachel Carter poured tea, watching her daughter without asking too much. They had a language built on shared silences. "You're thinking too loudly," her mother finally said. Imani smiled faintly. "It's been a week." Her mother nodded slowly. "And?" "They're not going to stop." "No," Rachel said, "they're not. Not until you give them something they can't ignore." Imani looked up. "Like what?" "Your truth, your control, your story told on your terms, not theirs." Imani considered that. Not fighting, not running, not reacting, owning. The next day, her locker was vandalized again. This time, there was a banana duct taped to the door with a note. "Welcome to the jungle." Imani peeled it off in silence. Students lingered nearby, watching, waiting. Brandon's voice floated down the hallway. "Did you not like your present?" She turned, cool and unshaken. "You might want to work on your handwriting. It's very incriminating." The laughter stopped. He stepped closer. "Maybe you need to learn some respect." "Maybe," she said, "you need to learn basic human decency." Phones emerged, fingers hovered. The tension in the air was no longer private, it was public. Imani understood something then. He wanted her to be angry. He wanted chaos, because chaos made people forget how it started. But Imani wasn't chaotic. She was in control. And Brandon Keller had no idea what storm he had just summoned. The parking lot was where the masks came off. During school hours, Brandon Keller wore a practiced smirk, a varsity jacket, and the smugness of inherited authority. But after the final bell rang and teachers disappeared behind locked doors, the tone changed. It was Friday. The air was crisp, heavy with anticipation. A week's worth of tension had been building towards something unspoken and inevitable. Imani Carter felt it before she saw it. The hush in the hallways, the knowing glances, the way Brandon's crew lingered longer than usual near the school exit. Something was coming, and she knew it had her name on it. She dropped her backpack by the school entrance and walked toward the lot, alone. No dramatics, no crowd, just purpose. Brandon was mid-laugh when he saw her. He straightened immediately, motioning for Logan and Tyler to flank him, like knights responding to a royal threat. "Well, well," he called, his voice bouncing off the asphalt. "Look who decided to come talk after all. Ready to beg for forgiveness?" Imani didn't stop walking. 10 feet away. 8. 5. "I'm done with your games, Brandon," she said. "The fake recordings, the vandalism, the whispers. It ends now." Brandon chuckled. "It ends when I say it ends." Students nearby had begun to gather, phones slipping discreetly from pockets. Drama always drew an audience. But this wasn't drama. This was a reckoning. "You think you can just walk in here and disrespect me?" he sneered. "This is my school." "Last I checked," Imani replied evenly, "this is a public institution funded by tax dollars, including my mother's." That earned a few gasps from the back. Brandon's face flushed. "You think being clever makes you untouchable?" he snapped. "You're outnumbered, outclassed. Walk away while you still can." "I already tried walking away," she said. "You followed. I stayed quiet. You escalated. I ignored you. You spread lies." Then softly, "Now we do this my way." Tyler cracked his knuckles. 3-on-1? Doesn't look good for you. Neither does targeting someone you thought couldn't fight back. Imani's stance shifted slightly. Weight forward, heels light. The subtle signs of someone not bracing but preparing. "This is your last chance," she said. "Leave me alone or face the consequences." Brandon scoffed. "What are you going to do? Call your mommy?" "I'm going to give you exactly what you've been begging for all week." He lunged first, reaching for her wrist. And that was his mistake. Imani moved like water. She sidestepped, grabbed his arm, and used his momentum to send him sprawling sideways. He hit the ground hard, gasping. Logan came next, faster but sloppier. All muscle, no precision. Imani ducked, pivoted, swept his legs, and he crashed onto the concrete with a sickening thud. Tyler hesitated, just long enough. She didn't wait for him to attack. A single strike to his shoulder, a twist of his arm, and he dropped with a yelp, cradling his elbow. By now, a crowd had formed, not shouting, not cheering, silent, watching. Brandon scrambled to his feet, furious. "You think you're tough?" he spat. "Let's see how tough." He charged again, but anger made him blind, and Imani, calm, centered, deadly, was ready. She let him come, waited for the wide swing, then ducked under, spun behind him and dropped him flat with a textbook hip throw. Seconds later, she had her knee between his shoulder blades, his face pressed to the asphalt. "Are we done?" she asked, voice low. "Get off me!" "Are we done?" Brandon grunted. "Fine, we're done. You're going to leave me alone. You and your little court." Silence. "Yes," he croaked. "We're clear." Imani stood. The crowd parted as she walked back to the school steps, retrieved her backpack, and disappeared inside. Behind her, Brandon sat bleeding and humiliated, surrounded by the weight of his undoing. Inside the main office, Principal Harlan glanced up from her desk as a student burst through the door. "There's been a thing in the lot." "What kind of thing?" she asked. "You should probably see for yourself." By Monday, the footage had gone viral. Not just the fight, but the control, the silence, the skill, the dignity, and what had begun as a targeted campaign to break Imani Carter had become something else entirely. A movement. The video spread before Imani had even made it home. By sunset, clips of the fight were circulating on group chats, TikTok, and even a few Reddit threads labeled "Karate Girl ends the patriarchy in one afternoon." But it wasn't the violence that captivated people. It was the precision, the control, the grace, the way she didn't yell, didn't boast, didn't escalate. She neutralized. That night, Imani sat at the kitchen table while her mother stood behind her, hand resting gently on her shoulder. "They're going to come after you," Carter said softly. "Not just those boys, the system, the people who protected them, people who don't like seeing power shift." "I know," Imani replied. "Do you regret it?" "No," she whispered. "I regret not doing it sooner." On Monday morning, Crestwood High walked differently. Whispers didn't follow Imani anymore. Nods did. Pauses of respect, of caution, of something like awe. She wasn't just a girl anymore. She was a symbol. Jessica Chen, a junior who had been quietly bullied for years, waited for Imani by her locker. "I saw the video," she said. "Thank you." "For what?" Imani asked. "For proving we don't have to stay quiet." By the third period, more students had approached her, some to thank her, some to share their own stories. Some just stood near her, like maybe they'd find courage by osmosis. In the office, Principal Harlan sat in a meeting with the superintendent and legal counsel. Parents had started calling. Some demanded Imani be suspended for violence. Others insisted she be given a medal. But the facts were inconvenient and clear. Multiple videos from multiple angles. Audio, witnesses. A growing number of students are stepping forward with harassment reports against Brandon Keller and his friends. By the end of the week, Brandon had quietly transferred schools. The official story was personal leave. But everyone knew the truth. Imani had done what the system wouldn't. A week later, Coach Torres found Imani sitting alone on the gym bleachers after school. "You started something," he said, watching a group of freshmen mimic basic self-defense moves on the mats below. "They started it," she replied. "I just responded." "Yes, but how you responded, that's what matters." She looked down at the students, some laughing, some struggling, all trying. "It's not about fighting," she said. "It's about remembering that fear doesn't have to own you." Coach nodded. "We're calling it the Student Empowerment and Safety Program." "You're leading it." She blinked. "I didn't ask. You didn't have to." She walked down to the mats, adjusted a student's stance, and began teaching without another word. 3 months later, over 80 students had joined the program. Bullying reports dropped by half. Teachers reported higher engagement, better attendance. Something intangible had shifted. Not because Imani had thrown a punch, but because she had refused to be broken. One afternoon, a girl from a nearby middle school handed Imani a note. "I saw your video," it read. "I was scared every day until I saw you. Now I'm not." Imani folded the paper gently and slipped it into her journal. She wasn't trying to be a hero, but sometimes heroes are just people who refuse to sit down. The lesson: real strength isn't loud. It doesn't seek revenge. It stands still in the storm and refuses to move until the storm changes shape. Imani Carter didn't fight for attention. She fought for peace, and when that peace was denied, she showed the world what boundaries look like when backed by quiet courage. She reminded us that being underestimated can be powerful if you know who you are beneath the silence. And perhaps the most lasting truth? Sometimes the most radical act is not raising your voice, but standing your ground.